a lot of artists, it's very tough because you definitely you eventually begin to identify with what you're doing as a form of self. And you do go through moments of feeling very low about what you're doing. I mean, the first few times I would perform just like in a classroom setting, I just felt like shit. Like every time I'm like, I sound horrible. Like all of my peers sound so much better than me. And that's this whole, internal dialogue that a lot of people go through. Even if you have been taking lessons for a really long time, for a lifetime, you can still struggle with that inner dialogue. And I guess it's just, sort of like a muscle. You have to exercise pushing yourself to put yourself out there. And the more you do it, the less horrible it feels and the easier it feels, and you can sort of feel more confident about doing it.
When you started to feel that confidence, like, yes, I can do this, I'm a great musician, was that after a performance? Was that after like a practice session? Like, where were you when you felt that?
Well, I think one of the really big steps that I took was when I finally had a professional level instrument. I saved up all my paper clips and pennies for I think, how old was I when I bought it? It was the last year of my undergrad, so I would have been 22. So I had saved up for 4 years, my entire degree, to buy this instrument that cost the same amount as a car.
What?
Yeah. And all those years before, I'd been playing on $1,000 violin, which is, in terms of violins, that's dirt cheap. And there's just certain things that don't sound as good on a cheap violin. So when I finally bought that professional level instrument, I just felt like there was this whole range of sounds I was able to achieve. I think that was the first step into feeling like, wow, okay, I can kind of do this.
That's so interesting to me because, I've always heard about Stradivarius, right? These $1 million violins, and apparently, if you're a musician, you always hear the reactions. It's like, wow, it feels so right, playing on these. What is it? What is the difference between, a cheap starter violin and one of these legacy, incredibly handmade instruments?
I've never touched a Stradivarius, so I don't know what it feels like
or
to play one of those.
1,000 to
but I have the
$30,000.
most expensive violin I've ever played was a $200,000 one.
What? That's a house.
Yeah, I know. I was backstage at a concert, and this violin was like, oh yeah, someone's loaning me this instrument. That's most of these musicians, by the way, who are playing these instruments, they can't afford them. It's just really nice rich people let them loan out an instrument.
So they'll just have them in their collection, and they'll just be like, yes, you can play my...
Yeah, oh, you sound really good, and, they have, maybe a business relationship with them, or if someone's, really famous in the field, they...
What a flex.
Yeah. So the most expensive instrument I've ever tried was $200,000, and it's so hard to describe. There's a certain level of, resonance that you can get out of the instrument. It just sounds good. It sounds better. It's like driving, a cheap car versus an expensive car. There's just a certain feel that is more expensive, nicer.
So do you feel, because instruments cost so much, and there is a big step up from sort of the entry-level $1,000 violin and, these thousands of dollars violins, do you feel that this is something that is accessible to people to pursue?
Yeah, so... There are, in terms of just the classical music field, which I feel like I can talk a lot about, there are, things that you can apply for if you come from a family of not good income, or if you come from an underserved community. That is getting better. There are a lot of diversity initiatives, things like that, that you can apply for and have access to. But that does not change the fact that perhaps the field is a little inaccessible, a lot inaccessible, and very intimidating. There's just all kinds of terminology and things that are not common household knowledge. So if you don't come from a musical family, it's like, how am I supposed to know where to start, where to look, things like that. So the instruments are expensive. That does make it a bit exclusive, as a bit unfair. But there are cheap instruments. I started on a very cheap instrument, and I crawled and climbed my way to an expensive instrument.
And you got into a conservatory, which is insanely impressive.
Yeah, Thank you. Yes. So when there's a will, there's a way. It does need to be more accessible. Yeah. But to answer your question, yeah, it is a bit exclusive.